Welcome to You Are Intuitive, a refreshing series of interviews featuring candid, intimate, and grounded conversations about developing and using intuition in the real world. I'm your host, Dana Mahacek, and it is an absolute privilege to have you here. Thank you so much for watching, listening, and tuning in. My guest today is a spiritual revolutionary, writer, and priestess. Katie Burke helps awakening women to ignite the power within themselves, to clarify their service and activism in the world. Her sacred contract with the divine is to encourage and empower women to create new paradigms of thinking, feeling, and serving. Katie offers divine feminine awakening mentorships, is a ritual and ceremony designer, as well as a retreat facilitator. She is an oracle, full-time mother, and light worker, and she is also the creator of the Modern Priestess movement, which you can learn more about on her website and YouTube page. It was such a delight to host this conversation with Katie, and I hope that you will enjoy it. Thank you again for being here. Hi, Katie. I'm so excited to have you here and to speak with you. Thanks so much for being here.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for having me.
There's so many things I want to speak with you about.
Yeah, let's dive right in. I'm ready.
Yeah, well, let's kind of start with a question that seems kind of counterintuitive, considering that this is called You Are Intuitive, the video series. Do you consider yourself to be intuitive?
Yes.
Or do you call yourself intuitive?
Yes, I do call myself intuitive now. But this is in terms of like a lifetime, a pretty new label for me. So in retro, I grew up just no concept of intuition, right? So I knew I always could trust my feelings, and there was a deep knowing, but I didn't have a word for it. Like I wouldn't have known to call it, oh, this is my intuition,
yes,
or this is my guidance, or this is, my connection, or, all of those words that we could use there. But I did, so I had a deep, deep, deep knowing and trust that I just knew things sometimes,
Yeah.
And I just knew it. And so there was that, but that was probably, and even that I would have, that's just for me. I wouldn't have shared that with anybody at that time. So yeah, I'm very openly intuitive now, but
it hasn't always been that way.
Not always, no.
And just what you were saying here, that when you were younger, you sometimes knew things, but you would never say anything, that was just for you.
Yeah.
If you can go back sort of into your young mind, what fears or what knowledge did you have about why you shouldn't say that? Like, what were the reactions you were fearing or expecting if you were to say something like that about what you knew?
Well, it's funny. I was such a sensitive kid and teenager, like so sensitive. And I remember sometimes even if people would get too close to my personal space, it was almost like I could feel them, like when they would actually penetrate my aura. Yeah. And I didn't know what it was at the time, right? But like it would just like I could just feel them so strongly. And and I remember my dad would totally tease me about this and like kind of come over and be like, oh, like I'm in your, I'm in, like, I forget what he would even call it, but like in your space or in your aura or whatever. And kind of like tease me about it, but it felt so like this was a very real experience I was having. And so I just remember feeling like anything that was different or had to do with things that weren't physical was not something that I was going to be heard. There was almost my intuitive knowing was telling me, even if you did try to speak to these things, there are not ears to hear.
Yes, at this time or in this place.
At this time or in this place. So it was almost this act of just like guarding my innocence from even being like torn down even more, So so I think just intuitively I knew not to go there with and I grew up in just a really very small town, very conservative, and when I say small, I mean 2,000 people small, like a very just farmers around. And playing in cornfields and all that whole childhood was very much what my experience was. And so and in most of those communities there's a very strong fundamentalist Christian religion that typically is the ruling belief system in those communities. So that was what I grew up in. And my parents were really involved in the church. I was really involved in the church, so within that, there was a lot of fear of anything outside of this of that container. It was really just a lot of ignorance.
So almost like you intuitively understood, even though you couldn't have labeled it that way at the time, but you knew that disclosing anything about energetic data you were receiving or your own emotional sensitivity, that was just wrong or bad. Like, was there
it wasn't,
or that it would have been interpreted by others as wrong or bad, even if it was right?
Maybe not even wrong or bad, but just what's the word? Like, we wouldn't have been able to relate. Like it just wouldn't have landed. Like it wouldn't have helped our any sort of connection, really. That's how I always felt. I didn't feel like if I could speak to these things. And as you were talking, I remember being in church, and one of the things that I would do kind of for fun is I would just like open up the Bible to a verse, like during service or whatever, and I would just like intuitively like pick out a verse, right? Kind of like that was like my version of pulling a card. And then that would be kind of where I would go in my own head. And like that just felt more comforting and like actually worth my time being there. And so I don't, I mean, it definitely, for me, it came from a place of just, fearful that if I would ever talk about this, that I don't think anybody else has I felt very, very much alone in the things that I was feeling, or, it just didn't feel, correct or right. But there was this sense of me that, I loved the idea of a church. I loved the sanctuary when it was empty. I I craved prayer, but I also didn't want to be told like to close my eyes and pray and do it the way that I was being told, so there was this like always this, I never went that, I think I tried to like be atheist because it was just like, so, and it just was like, this is not real.
I need
like
devotion.
Like I like lasted for a minute where I was like, but that's really not what I believe at all. So then, so it was just it was not a conducive environment for any sort of outside opinions or thinking. And I certainly felt like this kind of intuitive, not physical, not recorded in the Bible, then it's like not really allowed to be talked about. Yeah.
And did you have like I guess, a coping mechanism or a strategy to kind of shut that side down? Or was it always kind of a secret part of you?
Yeah, it was something I just kept to myself. And the first time, I just wrote about this recently, just personally, I haven't published it, but my husband and I are about to do a course about partnership. And as I was really digging into that and the story of our relationship, I remember I just met him, and I was dating somebody else, but I had just met Ben, my current husband, and we had a conversation, and I was walking to my car, and I remember saying out loud, and I had to say it out loud. I had to use my throat chakra, which I didn't even know I had a throat chakra at the time, but I had to say it out loud, like, I'm going to marry that man. And he hadn't even, we weren't dating. I was with somebody else. So I had to break up with my boyfriend. I did all of these things just because
you had commanded it. Yeah.
I commanded it. It just had to come through me. And that was the first time I started to really pay attention to how powerful I'm creating my reality through this, with the guidance of this intuition. And at the time, I think I would call it knowing, before I had access to all of the spiritual lingo that we kind of have now, and all of these books and terms and things that we can totally dig into. But that was kind of a wonderful thing of my innocence, is I didn't know even what to call it, except it was just me. And that's all your intuition is, right? It's just you. Just it comes in different forms and different ways for all of us.
Yeah. And it is it's just a different way of knowing and a different way of perceiving. It's just like an added,
it's just a sense.
Yeah. It's like a little, it's extra information or extra data that you can choose how to process it and how to interpret it and whether you're going to take action on it or not.
Yeah.
But I know for me, and let's talk about this actually right now, is your experience of being intuitive now, is that different from what you would have expected it to be based on the spiritual lingo and based on what you might have read in books recently about what it means to be intuitive or what that looks like?
Yeah, I guess it has always been so subtle for me. And I guess I thought that the deeper I'd go into it, and you know what, I don't know, it's so, your intuition is something you can just keep, and that connection is something you can just keep going deeper and deeper and deeper, and it can get more subtle and more subtle and more subtle. So I just keep finding the ways that it is subtle, and that's really it just, the deeper I go with this, the more I realize the subtlety is always there. Does that make sense?
I do. It makes a lot of sense.
Okay. Yeah.
And especially because when you were saying that, I was thinking of my own experience, expecting that intuition was going to be this big splashy thing, this big obvious thunder and lightning and burning bushes and angels speaking to me. Yeah. And then when it ended up being subtle and just, usually it's just on everyday things, really kind of mundane things.
Yes, totally.
And I was maybe I'm not actually intuitive, or maybe I'm not intuitive enough because it's not this profound, life-altering thing every single time I'm intuitive.
Yeah.
Did you have something similar with your experience?
This is, I did. And I've never really put words to it. So thank you. What a beautiful question and topic to discuss, because it's get this loaf of bread, not that one.
Yeah.
It's like that sometimes, right? It's just it's really, or just circle around one more time, the parking spot will be open when you come back, or something like that. And I think that that was absolutely something I had to give myself a lot of permission to tap into to my guidance for things that are really simple. And that is, our higher self or your guides or whatever you think is kind of helping coordinate things for you, want to be involved, or at least my experiences, and I think most people's experiences, they want to be involved in like the everyday life, because that's what we're doing here. Like,
we're living everyday life here.
So I think that I was, I met my friend, she's a local friend here who is an angel intuitive, and I would go and get readings from her, and it was just about these really kind of mundane things, but made my life so much easier. And so so I think I definitely, in the beginning, as I was starting to wake up, I thought that like, oh, my intuition or my guidance is only going to come down and like swoop in at these like big pivotal moments, or like when I'm about to make a mistake, or like it'll be this like big signal. And I love it. And now I think when you start to connect to your intuition even more, you start to see subtle things, and it's actually a big thing for you. So you'll see an animal like land on a branch right as you like needed to see that animal, you know what I mean? And like things will start to happen, and it's just if anybody else was around, it's just they don't even see it. But for you, there's like kind of that lightning bolt moment of pay attention right here, there's something happening, or like nature's communicating with you, or whatever it may be, or you drop a dish and it breaks, or and it's kind of that way that gets it's just something, and so those events for me are now the burning bush moments, right? And so I think the more it's what a beautiful topic though, and beautiful thing to reflect on, because I would say most of the time I'm using my intuition, it's these little nudges, right? Yeah.
I know another thing, just from my own experience when I was starting, my like gold standard of psychic was people who could communicate with spirits, like psychic mediums. And because I couldn't see or talk to dead people, I was like, well, I must not be really psychic, or I must not be an intuitive.
Right.
So doing this series and speaking with people, it's been a good opportunity to kind of go back and unpack all of these assumptions I had about what it would be like, or sort of like the level I needed to attain in order to be like a legitimate or a real intuitive, or be able to claim that identity for myself. And now, to me, it's just so obvious that like everybody is intuitive now already.
Yes. like whether they're aware of it or not, it just, and that's even the people in my life who don't believe in intuition, or don't believe, like they just don't, they don't believe it for them. That's not something going on. It's been interesting now having that perspective that, I hope I'm not covering my mic. It's been interesting having that perspective of everyone, which is so true. Everyone they have their own way that they are intuitive. And so, like it's a good reminder for me to put myself in that place of seeing people's gifts, when maybe they're not, and honoring it, even if they aren't, it can be really helpful, I think, for all of us, just kind of being here together in this really strange time. So,
Do you work with people now, or do people come to you who feel, oh, Katie, you're so intuitive, or you're so psychic, or you're such a priestess, and then, but feeling less than that? Like the people who are coming to you, it's almost like you've been put on an intuitive pedestal.
And it's this just came out. It like bursted my heart open because I just finished up last week my last one-on-one client. I'm very pregnant right now, which isn't being shown in the camera. But I just finished up with my last one-on-one client, and the last question she had for me, and we'd had like 4 sessions, so it was just like 4-week package. And it was the last question she wanted to ask me, and she said, "Do you think that I'll ever be able to connect with my guides the way that you're able to, or do I always have to go to someone who is connected?" And the reason it broke my heart open is because I remember a year and a half ago asking my mentor, "Do you think I'll ever be able to connect?" And it was like, and I have chills even just saying that. Like, it was so, I heard myself on the other end. But just like it was unbelievable for me. And it was I was just so grateful that she asked that question so that I could share, like,
yes,
yes,
100%. Yes.
I know from personal experience. And I'm so happy to tell you that absolutely you can connect in any way that you want to connect. If you want to do channeled writing, or whatever route that, like, you're feeling really curious, and the curiosity is key. If it's that true, like, inner child curiosity, like, those are the breadcrumbs to follow. Like, I think with any sort of like spiritual offering and services. And so yeah, I just shared my story with her about that, of like, I was asking my mentor like 18 months ago this exact same question about these exact same guides that we're working with together. And so it can happen really, really quickly if you set yourself, and I've been incredibly I've been really disciplined with writing, and with that connection and with that devotion to, I really, really, really wanted it. So it happened, and it happened pretty quickly. And it's a muscle that you have to kind of exercise like anything else, like any of your actual muscles. It's true. You just have to keep showing up and keep stretching it and adding on more challenges. And yeah.
And a lot of the people that I'm working with, I use that gym analogy a lot, actually, about like building up the muscles, and how you wouldn't go to a gym and on like day 1 try to like bench press 800 pounds. You could try doing that, but it's going to hurt, and you're going to be sore, and you're going to be discouraged and not want to go back to the gym and try that ever again.
Right.
But if you start off even without any weight, just your own body weight, and gradually over time add to it, you can develop your fitness that way, your intuitive fitness. And also what you were saying about that, there was another thread that was coming up with that. With the practices. First of all, what I wanted to say first of all was that having that intention and that openness and that belief that like this is possible for me. Whoever's watching this, and if somebody's wondering, it's easy for them to say because they're so intuitive or whatever, having that initial belief and trust that A, I am already intuitive, B, I would like to develop those muscles a little further. Just setting that intention can open so many doors really, really quickly. And then the next thing I wanted to ask you was about your devotional practices and about your discipline. How have you found that you've been able to develop that intuitive strength personally? What kind of practices do you do?
I had a really rigorous journaling practice that it was really, I had to clear a lot of those beliefs that were telling me that I wasn't intuitive. Like the programming that had happened to me and I don't say this in a victim kind of way, but just as a, like, just my story was, I put myself through a particular experience so that I would have to sit down and actually convince myself that I am not that, and that I am something else. And for me, I had to do that with my writing. So I think I can't think of a more accelerated, because it's just you and you're just, and that's the really, that's where the really powerful accelerated stuff can happen. I also had set myself up with a lot of support at that time though too. So I was working with a mentor who was really helping me through it and seeing me through it. I had, just like the people around me they like got what I was doing and they were encouraging me to keep going. And so there was that element as well. And I think those two combined, like the dedication to sit down and like do the inner work and the inner writing, that's a weird phrase, but just like kind of connecting with that inner child and letting her write, or whatever the practice, whether that inner 17-year-old or inner 23-year-old, and giving the pen over to her. And like, she had a lot of anger about not being able to be who she really was. And so when you for me, when I allowed those parts of myself, I like exfoliated all of that off, then it was like, okay, so what do I believe? And I am this intuitive, like really creative, gifted, like all of these things. I have access to these things and I know it. And but it took that takes time. That does not just happen. And for me, some of the practices that I would do that were much more soothing. Writing is soothing, but like the ones that were just a bit softer is like, I started getting decks of cards that I was really drawn to, and pulling a card and knowing that the card that I pulled in this moment was the card that I need, and just really like that for me was those early like gym days, right? When you're like lifting the little weights, where it's like I would sit down and very intentionally know the card I'm going to pull is the card I need right now. And then with that intention, and then you just start to get the confirmations so quickly that you get excited to keep going. So that was a year and a half, 2 years, maybe more like 2.5 years ago now. And that's really how it started. And then the doors just started opening, and then it was just about like, are you ready to step into this, now? Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? And saying yes so many times over really kind of accelerated me, I think.
Yeah. And it does start that simply and that easily, right? It's not something like I also personally found that I benefited from having the presence of a mentor, someone who could, get me and reassure me that I wasn't crazy, or that that I wasn't making things up, or whatever I was afraid of. Having that mentor, and then also having a community. I had a mentor, but I didn't really have like girlfriends or even like a Facebook group at the time. It was still kind of venturing out on my own, and hoping that my friends wouldn't like disown me or whatever if I came out as intuitive. But in retrospect, when I think of like what would have been the most awesome way to go through that, for me, having a mentor and having the community, those would have been like the two most supportive, comforting, nourishing things. And then as far as practices go, like actually just doing it, not reading about doing it or like planning to do it, but like actually sitting down, pen to paper, or like deck in hand, and then just going through that.
I will say, so before it, you're right. There was a lot of months of me just curious.
Yeah.
Right. So the curiosity, and that totally translates as like getting all the books, right? And like
learning all the things
and learning all the things and all the words, and just kind of what like, and I think that that's okay too, right?
Totally.
Like, and I'm like looking back on like on your story and mine as well, right? When it's just like that time of discovery, and kind of just allowing this to sink into your consciousness, because there's probably part of you that knows that if you are there right now, that you're about to step into more. And that can bring up a lot of feelings, and which is where I think the journaling was really my my way to get to where I am now. Yeah.
And how would you say, now that you've tapped into your intuition, you're harnessing it, you're actually like utilizing it in a really conscious and cognizant way, how has your life changed because of that?
Everything's changed.
Nothing is the same. Yeah, exactly.
I can't even, every single thing is it's a beautiful way to live. It's a beautiful way I love living this way. It's the beauty way. And I don't even know how do we even keep this concise? I mean, my pregnancy is different because of it. I'm able to just, everything's richer, and you start to experience, life so much more beyond the physical, which is why it's hard for me to even put words to that answer, because the places I decide to live, the homes, that I've chosen,
your
the
business,
the things I wear, my business, every single thing is guided now by this. I'm fully in a place where it is heart led first, and then my mind. And I'm not saying I'm perfect at that by any means. There are absolutely days where my monkey mind wants to run the show, and there's still kind of almost, it feels like sometimes a foot in a reality of my heart and a foot in the reality of my mind leading.
Yeah.
And so that can be where we start to feel like kind of unbalanced, I think, is when we're kind of making that transition. Most decisions that if I'm actually going to execute on something, I need to know that like both of my feet are like kind of on that heart side, and get to that place. And, and that is something that has come to be like a much easier practice for me now, because I've been practicing. But it's everything is completely guided now.
Well, and even what you're talking about with it being imperfect, and sometimes the mind just wants to take control. Those are actually they end up sometimes being the funniest, in like a tragic kind of way, experiments in your life, where you're like, this is how it goes when I follow my heart and my intuition and my inner guidance. And this is how it goes when I listen to my mind. Absolutely. And like follow the mind's plans. And it's data, right? It's evidence. You've like been able to draw your own conclusions about your life based on what you've just gone through, and who you've prioritized in terms of your head and your heart.
Absolutely. Everything is now, it's surrendered, and it's just you're totally right. I've learned it's just, I don't like going down that route. It's not the most direct path to where I'm being led.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the other thing I always, when I do kind of, when I can see oh, I should have, like you kind of have that moment of like, oh, that was my intuition. That was, and you learn and you integrate that. Where was I going with that? It's just yeah, it's just easier to take the time you need. And
to get to that kind of
to that centered space, because like
ahead of time.
Yeah, like if I feel pressure to make a decision or anything, and I'm not really feeling connected, it's like, you know what, no, I got to shut this down and like get centered, or and there's been times where that's felt very vulnerable and very difficult, because the person on the other end of that, they don't understand what is going on.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's so clear to me now that that's what needs to happen. It's, it's a non-negotiable for me.
Yeah.
It's like, everything has to be kind of that checked in place. And I know if I don't do it that way now, that it's just not gonna be in my best interest in the end.
And even because I find, it's really easy to get caught in like the fear of missing out, or like if I don't decide right away, or if I don't know the plan, this opportunity won't be available again, or like I will somehow hinder myself if I don't like act immediately.
Yeah.
But then again, if I do pressure myself to do that from this like mental calculating strategic vantage point, it usually doesn't turn out so awesome.
Right.
So yeah, you learn enough times by like having things not go amazingly that okay, I don't need to be afraid of missing out. I'm going to take that time and check in with my heart.
Yeah, absolutely. And something that can be really helpful in those situations where it feels really muddled and you're just so like, I really feel this, like, I don't know. Something that I used to do this quite a lot, would connect to your future self, and like that, and your future self, that is the version who is so confident in her intuition, is so, is really connected. And even if it's just a future self, like a few weeks from now, where is she sitting? Like, where is she really, and it you can kind of like zoom out a bit that way and not be so in it. And that's what I think it can really kind of just like give yourself some of that. It gives you more space, when you give yourself that time, that like kind of doing that time travel in your head, it's like the space also expands and you're like, okay,
pressure's off.
Yeah, the pressure's off here for a second. Let me think about her and how would she answer this? And you just take your kind of that, you just zoom out and give yourself a little bit more room there. And I know that's easier said than done always, but it can be a really a more direct way when you don't have that mentor to go to who's like super connected and like giving you the reflection you need. It's, that future self is a really beautiful mentor to tap into as well.
And then just for the people watching it, in case there's people like, how do I connect to my future self?
It's really just about like, just picture the meditation is, I'm just trying to think of like a good example of a situation, but there's not one really coming to me. Just thinking about like, okay, am I gonna make this offering or not? Is this a good offering to be putting out right now, or should I hold back? Do I need to be more of an expert? Or like, so let's just say it's, I don't know, something like that, right? Like if you're going to go forward with like a creative endeavor. And so for me, because that's a decision I feel like I'm putting myself in a lot. So if that's me, I connect to however long I'm playing around with that program, if it's 4 weeks, if it's 6 months, I put myself at the end of that program, if I decided to do it or if I didn't decide to do it. And which future self feels more aligned, feels more, so I kind of split up the doorways, right? And then I connect with the version of myself that is like, who has gone through that experience. So, so that
just
would,
by like, sorry to interrupt, just by intending, I'm
totally
just unpacking it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
this is pure imagination that I'm talking about. This is nothing like, this is not something that will be shown to you. It's literally you making it up. Like, and that's it. And that's something that, when I was starting out, my mentor would remind me a lot, like, now it might feel like you're making this up. Go there.
All the time. Yeah, exactly.
All of the time. And that's okay. I want you to lean into that. I want you to practice that. And it felt weird at first to just like, what? Because it had been so long it had been years since I had really connected to my imagination. Yeah. And so now, it's a very real tool that I use to help that barometer of my intuition make a decision, is connecting to let's imagine it's already done. If it's already done, how do I feel? Right. So that's kind of what I'm talking about. And you can get as creative, and this is why ritual like is really so good, because because you can like tap into her, and you can tap into her. Sounds like maybe my family's home. And you can use a ritual. You can use a ritual to like anchor in that outcome. Yeah. So, usually like a full moon or new moon or whatever you're resonating with. I'm actually not even totally resonating with lunar cycles right now personally, but whatever it is that you want, you can, imagine it, and then you use the ritual to really seal in, like, that's the path, that's where I'm going, I'm going to do that. And this ritual consecrates that. And rituals can be really simple. They don't need to be super fancy or complicated. And there's so much like on Instagram and online now of people sharing just like what are they doing for their, for their rituals and things. And I used to be very into that. I would make a lot of time for ritual for myself, as I needed to build my confidence in, really making that transition to like both feet being in, right? Yeah. Because for a long time it was like I had one foot here, one foot here, and that is exhausting. It is. Really exhausting. Because ritual helped me kind of just, let's get over here. Yeah, it's all real.
And even though your feet are both in that heart space now, it's not like you're not using your intellect or that you're not using reason or logic at all. Yeah, it's an integrated version.
Totally.
That needs both, but in like a really, I guess, illuminated way rather than.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I feel way more balanced actually. It's that it actually just balances out. It's not that, and just maybe it's like I'm leading with my heart just this much more, right? But the other is still holding a lot of responsibility and a lot of weight. There is no like, I use that analogy because it's kind of like, there are moments where there's this like clear cut, okay, I'm gonna lead here. But probably the better analogy is that the scales, they just go like this. Yeah. And like truly, as far as how much I'm tapping into where my heart wants to take me, honestly. So, it's actually like once you start, that you're busy. There are things to do actually, and you need to be sharp, and you need to be taking really good care of yourself and your mental body and the way you're talking to yourself. So I've actually, it's like you will be on and you will be challenged to be using the things that you've already learned will come into play in such a beautiful way, most likely.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to, before I get your like website and all that, I wanted to show you, I pulled a card before our talk.
Oh, cool.
And
cool.
I was asking, you know, what is sort of the frequency that we will be anchoring into and attuning ourselves to, and it's heart. You can't really see it on here, but it's like this bear, and it says heart on it. So
bears are coming up a lot for me right now, so that's perfect.
There you go. And heart. This is what it's all about. So
yeah, absolutely. I have to add to that because that's so great. I had just recently, so yeah, you can learn, we'll give out, you can start to like learn more about me and my work. I work with Ascended Masters a lot now. And the one that I've just started inviting in, and I think you can see her on the screen, is Mother Mary. And she's really associated with bear medicine and very much this heart space as well, right? So it kind of, you can kind of almost get back to that, like so heart-led, but so sharp and so fierce and so mama bear, right? Yeah. It's like, so there's all of these beautiful balances that kind of start to come in when you lean into your intuition. It might, yeah, it's just so it surprised me a lot at how much it's more than just, well, it's not just, it's not that it's, I was about to say it's more than just your heart, but that's not correct. What it's more like you start to realize the depth of and the intelligence of your heart, and you're just like, wow. Whoa. Yeah. Yeah. So that's so perfect, because I just like lit a candle for Mother, and I'm really inviting her in, and she's really associated with bear and of course the heart center. So
it's all
confirming
perfect
for me too. Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Katie, for having this conversation with me. And I just know that everybody watching it is going to just feel so reassured and so validated that, you know, it's not too late. Things can open quickly, you know, just having that intention and that knowledge and that appreciation of yourself is like, I am intuitive too, can open all the doors. Yeah.
Thank you for hosting these conversations. And the courage that you've gone through this year has been just really inspiring. And, you know, you've said yes a lot. To
a lot.
Yeah. And so I've been just following that, and I'm just really touched. And you're the perfect person to be hosting these conversations, because I know how much you've lived this, especially this year. I mean, I think I've only known you for or followed you for like a year and a half, but I know this year especially has been just like, I know you've been doing it. So,
I have been showing up. Yeah.
You've been showing up for sure. So I feel like you're the perfect person to lead these conversations. So thank you for saying yes to that too.
Thank you, Katie. And if people want to learn, I know that you're very pregnant right now, but if people want to learn more about your work or follow you on social media, where's the best place to do that?
Instagram's the best place right now. And so everything that I'm doing is linked up to there pretty regularly. So I would say, if you want to find me on Instagram and connect to me and even send me a message, I've been doing a lot more stories lately and just trying to share more on that platform. But let's see. And then if you search YouTube for The Modern Priestess, you'll find a lot of videos and good content there as well. So those are the two places and then I do have a Facebook group, but all of that can be found like through Instagram. It's like kind of the portal to like all of the things.
All of the things, Katie.
Yeah. And then my website is Katie Burke, KatieBurke.co. So you can also dig a little deeper there.
And we'll link to that below the video too. So
okay, cool.
Thank you again, Katie.
You're
welcome.
Has
been such a treat chatting with you, as always.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then I'm just going to